Hello dear viewer, and thank you for joining me on day 44 of reading the Bible together. Today we are reading Exodus chapter 38 and 39 from the Old Testament, as well as Matthew chapter 25 verse 14 to 30 from the New Testament. Let's start. Exodus chapter 38, making the altar for burning offerings. For burning offerings, he made an altar out of acacia wood. It was square, 7.5 feet long and 7.5 feet wide, and it was 4.5 feet high. He made the projections at the top of the four corners, so that they formed one piece with the altar. He covered it all with bronze. He also made all the equipment for the altar: the pans, the shovels, the bowls, the hooks, and the fire pans. All this equipment was made of bronze. He made a bronze grating and put it under the rim of the altar so that it reached halfway up the altar. He made 4 carrying rings and put them on the 4 corners. He made carrying poles of acacia wood, covered them with bronze, and put them in the rings on each side of the altar. The altar was made of boards and was hollow. Making the bronze basin. He made the bronze basin and its bronze base out of the mirrors belonging to the woman who served at the entrance of the tent of the Lord's presence. The enclosure for the tent of the Lord's presence. For the tent of the Lord's presence, he made the enclosure out of fine linen curtains. On the south side, the curtains were 50 yards long, supported by 20 bronze posts in 20 bronze bases, with hooks and rods made of silver. The enclosure was the same on the north side. On the west side there were curtains 25 yards long, with 10 posts and 10 bases, and with hooks and rods made of silver. On the east side, where the entrance was, the enclosure was also 25 yards wide. On each side of the entrance there were 7.5 yards of curtains, with 3 posts and 3 bases. All the curtains around the enclosure were made of fine linen. The bases for the posts were made of bronze, and the hooks, the rods, and the covering of the tops of the posts were made of silver. All the posts around the enclosure were connected with silver rods. The curtain for the entrance of the enclosure was made of fine linen, woven with blue, purple, and red wool, and decorated with embroidery. It was 10 yards long and 2.5 yards high, like the curtains of the enclosure. It was supported by 4 posts in 4 bronze bases. Their hooks, the covering of their tops, and their rods were made of silver. All the pegs for the tent and for the surrounding enclosure were made of bronze. Metals used in the tent of the Lord's presence. Here is a list of the amounts of the metals used in the tent of the Lord's presence, where the 2 stone tablets were kept, on which the 10 commandments were written. The list was ordered by Moses and made by the Levites, who worked under the direction of Ithamar, son of Aaron the priest. Bezalel, the son of Uri, and grandson of Hur, from the tribe of Judah, made everything that the Lord had commanded. His helper, Aholiab, son of Ahishamach, from the tribe of Dan, was an engraver, a designer, and a weaver of fine linen, and of blue, purple, and red wool. All the gold that had been dedicated to the Lord for the sacred tent weighed 2,195 pounds, weighed according to the official standard. The silver from the census of the community weighed 7,550 pounds, weighed according to the official standard. This amount equaled the total paid by all persons enrolled in the census, each one paying the required amount, weighed according to the official standard. There were 603,550 men 20 years old or older enrolled in the census. Of the silver, 7,500 pounds were used to make the 100 bases for the sacred tent and for the curtain, 75 pounds for each base. With the remaining 50 pounds of silver, Bezalel made the rods, the hooks for the posts, and the covering for their tops. The bronze which was dedicated to the Lord amounted to 5,310 pounds. With it he made the basis for the entrance of the tent of the Lord's presence, the bronze altar with its bronze grating, all the equipment for the altar, the basis for the surrounding enclosure, and for the entrance of the enclosure, and all the pegs for the tent and the surrounding enclosure. Exodus chapter 39. Making the garments for the priests. With the blue, purple, and red wool they made the magnificent garments which the priests were to wear when they served in the holy place. They made the priestly garments for Aaron, as the Lord had commanded Moses. They made the ephod of fine linen, blue, purple, and red wool, and gold thread. They hammered out sheets of gold and cut them into thin strips to be worked into the fine linen and into the blue, purple, and red wool. They made 2 shoulder straps for the ephod and attached them to its sides so that it could be fastened. The finely woven belt, made of the same materials, was attached to the ephod so as to form one piece with it, as the Lord had commanded Moses. They prepared the carnelians and mounted them in gold settings. They were skillfully engraved with the names of the 12 sons of Jacob. They put them on the shoulder straps of the ephod to represent the 12 tribes of Israel, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Making the breastpiece. They made the breastpiece of the same materials as the ephod, and with similar embroidery. It was square and folded double, 9 inches long and 9 inches wide. They mounted 4 rows of precious stones on it. In the first row they mounted a ruby, a topaz, and a garnet. In the second row an emerald, a sapphire, and a diamond. In the third row a turquoise, an agate, and an amethyst. And in the fourth row a beryl, a carnelian, and a jasper. These were mounted in gold settings. Each of the 12 stones had engraved on it the name of the sons of Jacob, in order to represent the 12 tribes of Israel. For the breastpiece they made chains of pure gold, twisted like cords. They made 2 gold settings and 2 gold rings, and attached the 2 rings to the upper corners of the breastpiece. They fastened the 2 gold cords to the 2 rings, and fastened the other 2 ends of the cords to the 2 settings, and in this way attached them in front to the shoulder straps of the ephod. They made 2 rings of gold and attached them to the lower corners of the breastpiece, on the inside edge next to the ephod. They made 2 more gold rings and attached them to the lower part of the front of the 2 shoulder straps of the ephod, near the seam and above the finely woven belt. Just as the Lord had commanded Moses, they tied the rings of the breastpiece to the rings of the ephod with a blue cord, so that the breastpiece rested above the belt and did not come loose. Making the other priestly garments. The robe that goes under the ephod was made entirely of blue wool. The hole for the head was reinforced with a woven binding to keep it from tearing. All around its lower hem they put pomegranates of fine linen and of blue, purple, and red wool, alternating with bells of pure gold, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. They made the shirts for Aaron and his sons, and the turban, the caps, the linen shorts, and the sash of fine linen and of blue, purple, and red wool, decorated with embroidery, as the Lord had commanded Moses. They made the ornament, the sacred sign of dedication, out of pure gold, and they engraved on it, dedicated to the Lord. They tied it to the front of the turban with a blue cord, just as the Lord had commanded Moses. The completion of the work. All the work on the tent of the Lord's presence was finally completed. The Israelites made everything just as the Lord had commanded Moses. They brought to Moses the tent and all its equipment, its hooks, its frames, its crossbars, its posts and its bases, the covering of ram skin dyed red, the covering of fine leather, the curtain, the covenant box containing the stone tablets, its poles and its lid, the table and all its equipment, and the bread offered to God, the lampstand of pure gold, its lamps, all its equipment, and the oil for the lamps, the gold altar, the anointing oil, the sweet-smelling incense, the curtain for the entrance of the tent, the bronze altar with its bronze grating, its poles and all its equipment, the wash basin and its base, the curtains for the enclosure and its posts and bases, the curtain for the entrance of the enclosure and its ropes, the tent pegs, all the equipment to be used in the tent, and the magnificent garments the priests were to wear in the holy place, the sacred clothes for Aaron the priest and for his sons. The Israelites had done all the work just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Moses examined everything and saw that they had made it all just as the Lord had commanded. So Moses blessed them. Please feel free to pause the video here for time to reflect on what we have read. Let's continue. Matthew chapter 25 verse 14 to 30. The parable of the 3 servants. At that time the kingdom of heaven will be like this. Once there was a man who was about to leave home on a trip. He called his servants and put them in charge of his property. He gave to each one according to his ability. To one he gave 5,000 gold coins, to another he gave 2,000, and to another he gave 1,000. Then he left on his trip. The servant who had received 5,000 coins went at once and invested his money and earned another 5,000. In the same way, the servant who had received 2,000 coins earned another 2,000. But the servant who had received 1,000 coins went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with him. The servant who had received 5,000 coins came in and handed over the other 5,000. "You gave me 5,000 coins, sir," he said. "Look, here are another 5,000 that I have earned." "Well done, you good and faithful servant," said his master. "You have been faithful in managing small amounts, so I will put you in charge of large amounts. Come on in and share my happiness." Then the servant who had been given 2,000 coins came in and said, "You gave me 2,000 coins, sir. Look, here are another 2,000 that I have earned." "Well done, you good and faithful servant," said his master. "You have been faithful in managing small amounts, so I will put you in charge of large amounts. Come on in and share my happiness." Then the servant who had received 1,000 coins came in and said, "Sir, I know you are a hard man. You reap harvests where you did not plant, and you gather crops where you did not scatter seed. I was afraid, so I went off and hid your money in the ground. Look, here is what belongs to you." "You bad and lazy servant," his master said. "You knew, did you, that I reap harvests where I did not plant, and gather crops where I did not scatter seed? Well then, you should have deposited my money in the bank, and I would have received it all back with interest when I returned. Now take the money away from him and give it to the one who has 10,000 coins. For to every person who has something, even more will be given, and he will have more than enough. But the person who has nothing, even the little that he has will be taken away from him. As for this useless servant, throw him outside in the darkness. There he will cry and gnash his teeth." Please feel free to pause the video here for time to reflect on what we have read. That's it for today, and I hope that you'll join me in the next video. Wishing you a graceful morning, day, or evening.